I'm here with the former Hastings Mayor, Lawrence Yule, who's just been appointed to a new role of Crown Manager for Wairoa. Kia ora, Lawrence, and thanks for joining me.
Good, Andrew, my pleasure.
Lawrence, you've, as I said, you're a former Hastings Mayor. You're also a former National Party MP for Tuki, and now you've been chosen for this role, which will see you sort of basically working with the Hastings, with the sort of Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the Wairoa Council on looking at flood protection and that. Is that an accurate description of the role?
Absolutely it is. So the role is quite encompassing. It encourages me to oversee the interactions between the councils, to oversee the $70 million spend on flood protection works, and to report regularly to both the community and the ministers. So effectively, it's not a day-to-day management role, even though it's called a Crown Manager. It's more of a governance oversight role. But I will be heavily involved in the decisions. But the regional council is principally charged with developing the flood protection works. I imagine that Wairoa District will probably lead most of the public consultation. That's yet to be worked out, but I'd see that. And then the tripartite group, which is a group made up of the regional council, Wairoa District and Tato, they also have a decision-making role in this. But ultimately, in terms of the terms of reference, for want of a better word, I have oversight of everything now. And if I'm not happy, I can make some directive orders as to what's to happen.
And why do you think you were chosen for this role, Lawrence?
Well, I have a lot of knowledge of Wairoa. I've chaired the stakeholder group for the last 7 months. I've been in Wairoa about every week since Cyclone Gabriel. And I've also had, obviously, significant experience in local government. So I understand the tensions that can develop between different councils and different types of councils. We're in pretty unprecedented times for local authorities in Hawke's Bay generally to deal with Cyclone Gabriel. That is a massive challenge for all involved, the politicians, the staff, the ratepayers, the people affected. So it's a really difficult time. And I just think we've just got to calm things down a little bit in Wairoa. The government, in my view, has been generous with $70 million. There would be no flood protection, and there is none now without that. So we've got to effectively spend that well. We've got to make sure the community understand that no flood protection is 100% perfect, but that we're making most cost-effective, best use of that money to give them the maximum protection.
The 70 million sounds like a lot of money, but it actually isn't. Do you think it's going to be enough to get an effective flood management, flood protection?
Well, as I sit here today and as I have the information I've got at my fingertips, I believe it will be. Okay. Some people have said to me, "Oh, Lawrence, that's a bit ambitious." Well, I sort of look at the work that's already being done, which is a lot, to look at the North Clyde area, and that the latest figures for that are somewhere between 40 and 50 million. So then in my terms of reference, I've now been asked to look at what happened 8 weeks ago, the Kopi Road area. Yeah. If there's money available, that's quite a simple fix. That's probably just building a stop bank along the edge of the river on Kopi Road. So even if that's 10 million, you're up at 60, you're not 70, and you're certainly not at 100 or more. So I'm really optimistic we can give a really high level of flood protection, not perfect, but a high level of flood protection for 70 million.
So you say you've been to Wairoa regularly. Have you seen the extent of the devastation and just how people have been affected?
Absolutely. And as recently as just after the most recent event, I've had 2 days there. I've been out and had a look. And because I'm an engineer by training, I can't help myself but actually go and see, well, what could we do to fix this? Yeah. I think that's another part of why the government's asked me, because I do have a sort of inquisitorial mind to say, well, how can we make this better? We have currently roughly around 180 yellow sticker homes from Cyclone Gabriel, and around another 120 from the most recent event. So we have 300 yellow stickered homes, of which 180 of those are in 2C waiting to go to 1. And in the most recent flooding event, 120 of those are not categorised, but they're certainly yellow stickered. So there's 300 houses roughly that are in harm's way, and we need to find a solution to try and allow them some normality, to build back with confidence, to allow insurances to be reinstated, all those types of things. So there's a lot at stake here. But I believe 70 million can go an awful long way to helping with that.
Now, you were mayor during the time of the Havelock North water crisis. How has that sort of shaped the way you deal with this sort of thing? I know they're completely separate things, but they are crises, if you like, both crises. How do you use that experience to work in this situation?
Well, the first thing I want to do is, and I learnt this in Havelock, and I think despite my critics, most people were grateful of the fact I was completely upfront with the public about what was going on throughout the crisis and beyond. And I intend to do the same in Wairoa. We need to get the community on board with whatever the solution is. And we can talk about 1 in 100-year events or 1 in 500-year events. But, you know, if we build to a 1 in 100-year event and there's a 1 in 500-year event and it fails, everybody's got to understand what are the risks. So I'm trying to, with the 70 million, get the community on board to understand this is the best use of 70 million. This will give you the maximum level of protection, but nothing is fail-safe. That's the first thing. The second thing I probably learned out of everything in Havelock was that you need to ask more questions sometimes. You know, some of the things we found out later in Havelock weren't known to us in terms of the leadership. And I think what I've learned is you just need to ask more questions. And I intend to do that here, really basic questions. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's actually a busy time at the moment as well. We've got the inquiry that the government has put in place into Wairoa, which they say is going to be a rapid one, which we're going to hear probably pretty soon. Mark Bush is handling that. And then you've also got this legal action that's been brought as well, this class action. How does that affect what you do, and how does it interfere in any way with what you do?
Well, it unfortunately it will, in fact, slightly negatively on what I do. I'm specifically excluded from making any comment about anything to do with anything involved in legal action. Yeah. That's what's in the terms of reference. That being said, how the regional council responds to questions, requests, changes, all the rest of it will naturally be looked through a legal lens now, because, you know, they're seeking to manage their position, and I get that. The Mike Bush report, when it's out, I won't be commenting on it, but I will be taking into account what it says. For instance, and I don't know, I have no idea, I haven't seen the report, but if it said that the bar needs to be more proactively managed, or there needs to be a consideration of a more permanent structure to keep the mouth open, or groins, or those types of things, naturally I'll consider that. But it's, if it says that there needs to be a different structure for managing the bar, that's probably within the purview of what I can do in terms of flood protection works. But in terms of who did what and who should have done what and all that, that's for another group of people, not me. Okay. I'm really charged with understanding what that says and then translating that into providing the best flood protection work.
Okay, so I was going to ask you that, whether yours was any sort of backward looking. It's just purely focused on what you're going to do now.
Well, yes and no. If, for instance, and I have no idea what it's going to say, I'll repeat that, but if it said that there needs to be a different regime, or, for instance, that maybe the people of Wairoa should be in charge of decisions to open or close the bar, then, you know, I can suggest that might be a better thing to do than what may have happened. If there's any weaknesses found in that area, and as I say, I don't know yet. Yeah.
Now, in terms of your authority, do you have the authority to make decisions that have to be basically complied with by the council?
Correct. I have the ability to direct them. If they don't follow those directions, then I have to report that to the minister, and the minister can decide what to do next.
Okay.
But it is quite a significant imposition the minister's put on here. This is only the second time a Crown manager's been brought into a local authority since 2013. The only other intervention was where the commissioners were brought in Tauranga. So, I don't intend to be very directive in what I do unless I need to be.
Yeah.
I actually want to work with the players and the councils and the community and guide this through. But I do have some powers if needed.
Yeah, because you mentioned tensions in the situation, and clearly there are tensions between the two councils. And I don't think Wairoa Mayor Craig Little is very happy with the regional council at the moment. You've got good relations all around, but do you expect some prickliness from the councils when you do start sort of suggesting some things?
Well, potentially, but I think actually if you break it all down, the two councils actually do want to fix this. There's some prickliness and there's some well documented and public disagreements. But ultimately, Wairoa has no flood protection. The government's made $70 million available. The people of Wairoa deserve to have the best flood protection they can get in the fastest possible time with $70 million. And that's my focus. And there will be some people that are disadvantaged. Don't get me wrong. When you build flood protection schemes, you have to put them somewhere. And I'm going to try and minimise the impact on personal property, but it is not possible to avoid all impacts.
Yeah. Do you think this will be enough? I know you say you can't predict, and we are finding that life is very unpredictable now with climate change. Is there something bigger and broader that the government and as a country and as local government more can be done?
I've reflected on that this morning, particularly because I've been contacted by a few cynics who say that that Wairoa is lives by the coast. Sea level rise is going to go up by 2 meters or whatever the number is, and you're never going to beat this. In reality, I am going to look at the LiDAR data and the heights of places, but 70 million should be able to give us significant protection for a significant period of time. If everybody suggests that we should up and move people and move them to higher ground, then that is a massive decision for any government to make, because as soon as they do it one place, they're going to be asked to do it everywhere else.
Yeah.
Would the current owners actually want to fund their own movement? Well, that's a choice they can make. But, if you look at Kopu Road, for instance, those are historically owned homes, many of them. They're right next to the river. They used to use the river for swimming, for collecting kai. So many of those people, that multi-generational properties, they would, one, need a lot of convincing, two, a lot of resources to move. And so I think flood protection, particularly for the next 10, 20 odd years, is probably the only viable option, because if the Crown was to move into de-risking all that by moving everybody, it just, in my view, wouldn't be affordable.
I know Craig Little has actually done quite a good advocacy role for Wairoa, and initially after Cyclone Gabrielle, he did feel that central government could do more. Why do you think has the government stepped up so decisively on this recent flooding?
Well, I think Craig has done an extremely good job at advocating for Wairoa, early on in the piece, and I have to give everybody credit for this. The regional council came up with $70 million when a holistic package was put together by all the mayors and the recovery agency. So that was a pretty inspired piece of work, because in most situations you would normally say, well, we need to build this flood protection and it's going to cost X. And then the biggest challenge is finding the money. Here we have the money. We've just got to spend it wisely and expeditiously to give people protection. So Craig has done a really, really good job. Wairoa is isolated. It's a wonderful town. It's got wonderful people, but it is isolated, and it's a bit harder for ministers and other people to get to it. So he's punched way above his weight, in my view, in getting resources and the government's ear. And I've heard that from ministers as well.
Yeah. Now, going back, and you might find this a tricky question, but going back, you were a part of the group that wanted to amalgamate the councils. Do you think this is an example of why there should be amalgamation in Hawke's Bay?
Look, can I say I did try and I got soundly defeated. I still believe that there are merits in doing so, although I'm not promoting it now. I think what we're starting to see, though, and we see it in the Three Waters or the Waters Done Well or whatever the most recent nomenclature is that if you look at the Three Waters, Hastings and Napier are largely going to cross-subsidise Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay to make that work. So I think, and I've watched the other councils support Craig and Wairoa in Cyclone Gabriel, post-Cyclone Gabriel times. Do I think that I think they've come a long way, but it is relationship driven rather than structurally driven. But I think a great degree of sort of maturity has started to develop in that space, and it's critically clear to me, and discussing with the government ministers, what they want is a Hawke's Bay view. So if Hawke's Bay wants 250 million. They want to understand that Hawke's Bay wants 250 million. It's been worked out with everybody. Everybody's getting a share. These are the priorities. And that's where, effectively, decision-making frameworks like Matariki have been set up to actually help that happen.
And now I think you've got 18 months, is it, to complete this work? So are you optimistic that you'll be able to complete it in that time?
Well, I'm sort of, there's consenting and other issues at stake. There's land acquisition at stake. And I don't wish to shy away from that, because there is going to be some properties that are going to have to be acquired or leased or something to provide some of these flood protection options. So that's a complexity. I would hope that we can start having some construction underway in the 25 construction season. So from the middle of next year on, that's what I hope. But that's all consenting driven. That's all land acquisition driven. I believe in the next month or so, probably a month, we should be able to go to the community with a preferred option for North Clyde anyway, and start a community consultation exercise.
Well, Lawrence, Yule, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up with you again. Do appreciate your time, though.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.